curtains about to fall. We're gonna open your eyes so you can see who you're gonna call if you wanna be free. GLOBEBUSTERS! 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 Who you gonna call? Who you gonna call? Who you gonna call? Yeah! GLOBEBUSTERS! GLOBEBUSTERS! GLOBEBUSTERS!
And welcome everybody to GLOBEBUSTERS. We accept the reality of the world with which we're presented. It's as simple as that.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of GLOBEBUSTERS Tech. I'm your host, Zach. Good times for all, and today we're going to be diving deeper into tides. We did go over the tides just recently, and yeah, there's so much to this topic. We kind of just scratched the surface. I know Kyle has a presentation he put together. He wanted to share with you guys just to kind of show you how much there is to these things. So we're going to get into that. But before we do, we're going to say hello to the panel. Let's start off with Miss Cammie Nodell. Cammie, how are you doing tonight, ma'am?
Oh, I'm doing good, and good tidings to you. Tide from the base word of etymology, same as time, and so it'd be good times for all, but no, good tidings. That's where good tidings comes from, is also tides, and tides are set times. So
Nice.
so it's kind of like it's a good show for you, Zach, because it's good times or good tides for all. We might have to even change your name to Good Tides for All.
Okay.
But yeah, no, doing good and having fun. We're missing Karen right now, but she should be joining us a little bit later. She's out to dinner with Ted, which is fabulous. And as soon as they get home, she'll be jumping in. A lot to cover on tides. And so I'm excited to see the presentation.
Yeah, next up we have Mr. Kyle Adams. Kyle, how's it been going, man?
It's been going really well. Thank you for asking. I've always got to appreciate that, because there's the beginning of these episodes that we always do these introductions, but I just want to let the audience know that this isn't just for the sake of filling up time and space. It's but more than that. It's all about kind of being real with you. You know, it's an important part of building relationships and kind of let you know that I care about you. And, you know, in some cultures, you do kind of like you talk about other stuff before you talk about business, right? I think about that. Think about like an Italian family. How are you doing? You know, it's just kind of like.
You sit down and converse a little bit, have a conversation before you get into business. That's that's just
I appreciate
polite.
that. Yeah, it kind of makes me feel involved and cared about, and that's important. Yeah. Lately the Jehovah's Witnesses keep coming back and knocking on my door. I haven't scared them away yet, which is amazing. And so, because I've been like straight up with them from the beginning, just telling them like, you guys know I'm a flat earther, right? And kind of sharing them all about the Bible and about how the Bible teaches flat earth and getting all into the details. And that hasn't scared them away yet. Of like, whoa, this is different. Because I try to talk about this kind of stuff with like my siblings and like my other family members, other than like my wife and kids. They're totally fine with it. But when it comes to my siblings, they're totally hands off. That's taboo topic. Don't talk about that kind of stuff with me. And that's kind of depressing a little bit. For at least when it comes to like talking about the Bible and the scriptures, how that talks about flat earth, they won't go there. Because I feel like for them, you're trying to tell me that the Bible is false, because that's not what science says. And it's kind of this whole thing. But I found that it's interesting. It's kind of a dilemma for me, because if I start that way, that's kind of the approach. And they're like, well, it's got to be figurative, and they kind of go off into that whole mindset. Oh, it's got to be figurative. There's got to be some other explanation for it. But if I kind of come in with science first and then come and talk about the Bible, it's a lot easier with some people. So it's kind of hard to read it. But I haven't quite done that with the Jehovah's Witnesses, which kind of makes a unique experience, because a lot of people, it's about like trust in God or trust in man. And but with them, I just kind of started with the Bible and then kind of work into the science. And for some reason, it's working. Like they're very receptive to it, and I've just had a lot of fun with it.
And they're coming back and talking flat with you. So
Yeah, they'll come back and talk
your
to
goal
me.
is not to, like everybody else, not to get them to come back, because
Yeah, well, I'm not
they
trying
like
to brush them away or anything like that. Yeah, I'm just kind of being real with them and kind of letting them know kind of things like right up from the beginning. But I think with them particularly, they've got a lot more distrust for the government than a lot of other kind of cultures do. You know what I mean? And so they're already very much against blood transfusions. And so when I talk to them about vaccines and how they put aborted fetal cells in vaccines called MRC5, if you read the insert and find out what the ingredients are, we're like, wow, yeah. And they're just kind of getting on board with that. And they see a lot of these conspiracies that are out there and acknowledge them as facts. And so it's really cool and to be so well received. So yeah, that's been kind of fun stuff in my life lately.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
I find it
Good
I find
conversations.
it humorous that Jehovah Witnesses knocking on the door of the Mormons. I mean, I just
I have fun with it.
there's something
That's my
there's
motto is
something
just
about it.
any excuse to study the Bible is a good excuse in my home. So you guys are welcome in. And that's what I continually say. And yeah, and it's been a positive experience like every time. So
Well,
All
that was
right.
better, yeah. Karen,
Well, last and not
welcome.
least, we have Miss Karen B. Karen, how was
Oh.
dinner, ma'am?
It was fantastic. Happy
Did you
to
guys
be
have
here.
sushi?
No, we went to a place in Gaffney that's like, it's like homemade Russian food. They have like
Ooh.
they have like kebabs and borscht
Ooh.
and pilaf and all kinds of good stuff. There was really good. Anyway,
Yeah, I know there's
sorry.
quite a Russian community in this area. We even have a Russian shop that's like a big supermarket type thing, and it's all Russian goods right in Boiling Springs here.
I have a
Right down
Polish
Highway
bread store
9.
even, yeah.
Yeah, they had pierogies and all kinds of good stuff. You guys should probably like it too.
Well, it's between the two of us, so it'd be a fun place to meet sometime for, lunch or dinner. So yeah, keep that in mind.
Gaffney.
We
All
like Gaffney. We
right.
like the peach.
Yeah, it's right by the Peachoid.
Is it right by the Peachoid?
Yes.
Nice.
It's right by the
Nice.
Peachoid.
You guys have never driven down I-85 through South Carolina. There is a giant peach water tower with a
Mhm.
little leaf petal on the top of it and everything. It's got the little crack with the little, it's not like a perfect sphere that's
No, it
painted
looks
like
like
a
a
peach.
peach.
It's the shape of a peach and it's enormous. Yeah,
oh wow.
it's one of the things around here you can't miss. If you've ever driven past
Kind of
it,
looks
you
like
would
a
definitely
bear
notice.
butt with a hemorrhoid is what it.
Yeah, I call it I've been calling it the peach butt.
Yeah.
I've lived here, but it's called the Peachoid. Peachoid.
Mhm.
Funny.
It is. It's like almost obscene. It's pretty funny, and it is right up and close and personal on the highway. So it's always a good time.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So diving deeper into the tides. Kyle, did you want to take control, or was there
Sure.
something you
I
wanted
can
me to
present here.
share?
I got a
Okay.
screen share button here. I can go ahead and do that. What I want to do first, though, is I want to do a little bit of a recap about what we talked about last time on tidal nodes. And for people who might have missed that last time we talked about that, or kind of help out with that. And it also kind of helps kind of gets the ball rolling in this time. Anyway. So a tidal node, okay? A tidal node, it's a really important vocabulary word that pretty much every flat earther should be aware of and should remember. It's kind of like the term selenelian, and that's another one of those big important vocabulary words. Not quite the same topic, but it's up there with one of those ones that you just have to know what it is and remember at all times because it's a really significant thing. So tidal node. A tidal node is a place that has no tide or next to no tide, right? And so if I can go ahead and share screen now so you can kind of see a little bit more about what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I was watching a video that you had shared in the chat earlier today by Don't Sphere the Truth. It's a pretty good one. It's about an hour long. And yeah, it's amazing how the tide will be real high right on the opposite sides of some of these nodes. And other times there's the tide barely fluctuates next to some nodes. It's just really weird how there is not a whole lot of consistencies that you find with the tide. Some of them spin this way, some of them spin that way, but it doesn't matter, north or south of the equator. None of that stuff really comes into play. Tides are really, really interesting.
Okay. Oh, okay. There we go. Share. Okay. So I'm going to go over here. And so we didn't really get to talk a whole lot about Neil Tyson's video on tides, but he's got the nice animation that kind of shows how tides are supposed to work on the globe. And so we've got this high tide right in the center. We got the moon here and this other high tide on the other side where the sun is supposed to be, kind of right here. And you just kind of look at this diagram and it automatically assumes that all across like the center, that's like the equator line, you're going to have really high tides all along the equator line. And then as you go farther north, it's going to get lower and lower tides, right? And that's kind of what the globe model describes. And when that kind of falls apart, it has massive repercussions. So I wanted to talk a little bit about like why tidal nodes are so significant. What kind of stands out to you about them first? You guys have anything about why you think tidal nodes are really important for flat earthers to know about?
Well, just the whole idea of nodes in general when it comes to cymatics and stuff like that. That's
Cymatics being
like when you put the plate and you vibrate it, the Chladni plate, and put the sand on it. The nodes are the places where all the sand is gathering.
Whoa.
Everywhere else, the plate is vibrating. Those are your
Uh-huh.
antinodes, just like the waves or the tide going up and down. But here in where all that sand is gathering, the plate is at rest. That's why the sand all goes to those places.
Whoa. I didn't even think about that yet. I like that you brought that up because that was something that I haven't heard anyone mention so far concerning tidal nodes, is about like the vibrations of the, like we get talking about waves. I guess wave is a kind of a vibration, but that's typically not what
That's
you think of when
exactly
it comes
what it
to
is a vibration though. And like if you the same with the if you watch the tube, the the flaming tube, the Rubens tube,
yeah.
your nodes are your areas of no flame and your high areas. So in other words, your nodes are always, it's a pressure mediation, and your nodes show where your pressure mediation and what your pattern is with that. So in music, when you look at the pressure mediation, you see the wavelength quite beautifully. It's again, it's all part an integral part to looking at the flat earth and how it works, seeing where the pressure radiation and where these patterns are created tells you again how it's working. It's clues. In other words, it's clues of how it works. And we do look at the pressure mediation in the nodes, and we know if we apply it to a globe earth, like I said, and looking at it, spinning in our bulge factor and what they tell us about that, where we have our bulging in the middle and just putting in room velocity, your patterns do not match up in that in that, again, in that model at all. So what do they mean in the flat earth model? It's, picking up the pulse. Tide is setting times. People set times by it. They mark their days. They mark, again, different places. We know the tides are unusual because, again, there are in some areas, not in other areas. You have your nodal points on it, and then you have, again, your solar tides in other areas where they're not doing the same as in different areas. It's areas of curiosity that's not well understood. So it's definitely in flat earth. If you want to understand flat earth, you have to understand how it works. If you want to get to what it looks like and again, get the different properties in that,
Mhm.
we need to know what we're dealing with.
Yeah.
So to me, that's why it's important to a flat earth.
Yeah. When you talked about vibrations, I'm thinking about like the ground vibrating, like you're talking about with the sound, and kind of I'm thinking about like the vibration of crystals and about how that kind of vibration. And I'm like, whoa, I didn't even think about that, because normally when you think of like waves, I'm thinking about like waves caused by like the wind and stuff like that. You know what I mean? But this is kind of a little different, and I'm like, whoa, okay, this is fascinating to think about that
Yeah, this is the
in
whole sea
this regard.
level rising and setting, There's
'Cause
waves
This
that-
is
on
our
top of
pulse.
them,
Yeah.
but this is whole vast areas of the sea just rising up and
yeah,
lowering down at different
this
times.
cymatics aspect, I really like that you brought that up, because I didn't even think about that before. But yeah, I love that. So I'll kind of think about that through here.
Could you hit
the-
real quick on your screen? There's that hide button, and it'll get rid of that little.
oh,
Yeah, there you go.
cool. Okay, so I'm
While
just
you're doing
gonna.
that and clearing it too, Donald Piasek in the chat, we also have the areas where the oceans don't mix. That's another favorite topic of mine, is where waters meet
Hmm.
waters. So fascinating. When the waters meet waters, you see a difference. They have their own world. But I digress, and let's go back to the tides. Part of the
Well,
water
real
is
quick, on
magical.
top of that, I want to add something to that because yeah, it is really cool. I
Uh-huh.
learned sometime within the last year, I think it's in the Atlantic, there is a sea inside the ocean that touches no land,
Mhm.
but
The
the water
Sargasso
is
Sea.
so different than the Atlantic Ocean water that they've named this body of water that's surrounded by the Atlantic Ocean its own little sea because it is different. The water salinity, everything is different about the water than outside in the Atlantic Ocean.
Interesting. Yeah, it's a sea within a sea. I'll have to look that
Mhm.
one up, because that's right there really interesting to talk about right there. I was like, huh, because it kind of goes with some of the other things. I'm going to come back, and I want to talk about that
Right, and
because
so important for navigation to that area. That's the place where in the Sargasso Seas, the ships, they don't like to travel through because uh, again, they don't make any time on it. It's, you kind of get stuck there. It's just an area, more of a stagnant energy, pattern in there. So yeah,
yeah,
fun things to look at.
yeah.
Same
So
with
I've
like
got
that whirlpool on the side. I'll be quiet now. Go ahead, Kyle.
you're fine.
Present.
You're fine. So I just have this little animation I wanted to show you with Neil
Is
Tyson.
basically the same, no matter its phase.
No matter its phase.
What happens at full moon
Uh-huh.
is that the sun's tides add to the moon's tides precisely.
Oh, snap. We talking about a
Okay,
tide of...
so that was it. His main thing here is just talking about how the tide is caused by the gravity, and it's also caused by the Earth rotation, and how he kind of has this
The
thing
Earth.
where he's got this thing where he's got the spinning Earth, and it just kind of rotates into the water, and it's got this bulge all around. I already talked to you about that with the high tide always being right at the center, and then the low tide always being like on the other sides.
Well,
So
yeah, but
that was,
wouldn't it always be the highest tides be at the equator if this were the case?
Yes,
yes, that was my point.
that's what it
Yeah.
looks like to me.
Yeah, I think it totally falls apart. And I liked Don't Sphere the Truth. He had this other animation here that kind of shows it in a different perspective, and that one's at 12:1. Let's see if I can share that real quick.
Gotta love the ads.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was a good video as well.
Okay.
I
So,
think this was added into the video I watched earlier. The longer
yeah,
one.
I
Oh, this
noticed.
is the same one. Okay, yeah,
Yeah,
58 minutes.
this is part of it, and I just wanted to show this.
Extremely embarrassing. It is extremely embarrassing to me that this is the best that science can give us. And this is a a model of what the tides would look like if it was the moon. And this is
Can
on
you
YouTube.
maximize that, Kyle?
Yeah, yeah. So it's kind of where'd it go? Okay, so this red area is like the really high tide, and then this blue area is the really low tide. It's all in one spot, and there's no room for any kind of tidal nodes in this whole thing whatsoever. Again, tidal node being that place where there is no tide.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so just kind of
This is the
seeing
best
this,
that
what the
science can
globe
give us.
model predicts, if it was all due to gravity from the sun and moon. Yeah, this is kind
Yeah,
of
it looks nothing like that.
yeah. And so I was going to show you next a little bit about where did it go? What causes it? What does the globe claim causes the tides? Okay. I also want to talk a little bit about correlation does not equal causation, but causation should involve some kind of correlation, if you can follow me on that. Okay. If this is causing it, then we should see the same thing happening all over the place in each and every tidal node. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So a causation for it should have some correlation, but yeah. So that's what my big point here. And so we've got the Wikipedia entry on tidal nodes, and this is pretty significant when it kind of comes down to it. Okay. And so the more technical term is the amphidromic point. And they
Wow,
point
I've
out
never heard that before.
the amphidromic point. That's the technical term for it, the less common term though. And what's really interesting here is here we've got our graphic on tidal nodes showing all of this, and we can point out how it shows the arrows. Okay, this graphic is actually coming right from NASA. Okay, NASA's all interested in tides for some reason, but yeah, and you can see kind of right down the middle where it's really inconsistent, and you got a lot of tidal nodes right where we should be having the highest tides of all, right? And so this is also kind of that thing I think you were talking about that, where you get these tidal nodes way out in the middle of the ocean that aren't next to any land whatsoever. And that's a really interesting point right there. And so I wanted to go back to
Makes me wonder where that C within a C is compared to all those tidal nodes. Just a thought. Makes me wonder.
yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really near one of those nodes in the South Atlantic there.
Okay.
Cammy would know better.
Okay. This was really interesting. Okay. Because the term amphidromic point, it comes from the Greek words amphi, around, running, referring to rotary tides. And so that was one of the things that we talked a little bit about last time, but I want to kind of go in and reemphasize this about how a tide is the tides rotate around these points.
Is clockwise.
Okay. So this is a segment from that bigger video.
This one you can see is counterclockwise. This one you can see is also clockwise. And this one here is counterclockwise. And there's really no pattern to whether it's going to be clockwise or counterclockwise. This shows a live animation of the tides. And you can see exactly what I mean when I say that tides revolve around the nodes. So I told you about those two nodes up here in Hudson's Bay. You can see the high tide in red revolving around the coast of Hudson's Bay. You can also see this in New Zealand, which I told you was an on-land tidal node. You can see this high tide in red spinning around New Zealand, and the low tide in blue, so negative tide, also spinning around New Zealand, and they almost look like magnetic fields in the.
Okay, so I just wanted to really emphasize that point right there, because he said that tidal nodes can exist on land.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? They can exist on land, and that was really significant. And this also kind of talks about that. Okay, why would a tide be revolving around this point, these central points, if it was caused by the moon or the rotation of the Earth? That doesn't quite make sense, does it?
Not at all.
Yeah, it revolves around these points. And so that's kind of one big thing when it comes to the whole tide thing that we should really take into consideration is, are these tidal nodes actually responsible for the tides? Okay, it's not
looks
just
like it to me. Honestly, when I look at that animation of it moving, it looks like it has nothing to do with the sun and the moon. Although they do make points about how it's intensified when the moon and the sun are 180 degrees out from each other.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of one of the things that was really kind of standing out to me too, was here we have a really obvious tidal node right here. I kind of look for the dark blue spots, but right here there's a tidal node, but it's not turning dark blue. It's just a point of rotation where the tides go around right here. Why is it going around there? That's a big question. And so as we're kind of looking through all this, I really want to be looking for those points of commonality. Look for common features that all the tidal nodes have in common. And I wanted to, before quite getting into all that, I wanted to go back and talk a little bit more about the globalist perspective. What do the globalists claim causes tidal nodes? And there's this diagram over here. We're seeing nodes and antinodes right there. And like, oh man, you see those words node and antinode pop up all over the place, right? But so they talk about waves and the cancellation of waves. And one of the members of my debate board, Theodore, he was talking to me and trying to repeat back what they're telling you here about how one wave will cancel out another wave, and it ends up being like noise cancellation headphones. Like the sound actually just gets canceled out, and that's what's causing the tide to just cease to exist in those areas where you get these conflicting waves. Does that make sense at all? Mm-hmm. And so, yeah. But in order for this to happen, I would expect some kind of common features along with like a whole bunch of different tides. So we're talking about like an echo here. And so if this were true, what they're describing, I would expect all tidal nodes to be near land, right? There's got to be something to echo off of, right?
Unless it's something to do with the surface, the seafloor. The shape of the seafloor might have some effect on something, possibly.
And so that's the shape of the seafloor is a really interesting thing as well. And so that's where it's fascinating to look at ocean depths as we're kind of looking for different clues. Oh, these are some examples of nodes. We see a bunch of nodes used all over the place. We've got these lunar nodes on the globe model, and then you could look at botany and you get nodes are parts of a plant, like the intersecting or kind of offshoots of a plant. And so, and if you look at dictionary.com, you get like a ton of different definitions for the word node. Yeah, tons of different definitions of the word node. And so it can be kind of confusing with that word kind of when it's used so frequently. It's a homonym, I think that's the term for it, where it's the same word that's used with different definitions all over the place.
Wow, using geometry, using all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
Engineering, optics. Wow.
Yeah. So that was kind of like, it's just weird how they're making it unnecessarily complicated instead of just, yeah.
And if you
Yeah,
go
those
back to that,
important
we're
words they
using
like to mix.
physics right there. We are using physics for sure. If you go to your physics definition, it's
Yep.
where you want to be.
Point line region, standing in a wave. Okay, so I just had to share all of that right there because it's a pretty. I'm a big fan of definitions. And
you'll notice now when you're looking at in astronomy where it says either the 2 points where it crosses over, if you go to the lunar nodes, or that when we do the flat earth, Karen and I do our map, you'll notice I moved the nodes over to, if you move them, shift them 90 degrees, because if you're on the flat earth and looking at that from above as far as the phases, where the X's are is where you would have a half moon, and where they are directly, again, 90 degrees from there, where the yellow is on top of it and then the blue is on top of it, that is where you would cross over from the bottom. That's where you would exactly cross over from the bottom.
mhm.
So again, your nodes
Yeah,
should
your
cross
map, I
over
like.
point there.
I really like your map when it comes to describing things there. Okay, so there was one other thing I wanted to say here. Okay, so tidal nodes are really significant when it comes to the whole gravitational theory, right? When it comes to everything about gravity, it's all about, the moon is going to be causing all this gravity. It's a huge part of that whole concept, right? And it's also not only a huge part of the gravitational concept, but the entire heliocentric model depends on this gravity causing the tides, basically. So when a tidal node ends up debunking that thing, you get this big domino effect. There goes the whole gravity thing, and also there goes the heliocentric model. So that's part of why this is like really important to know about. We talked about how tidal nodes can be on land. We talked about rotation, about how they rotate around these points. And we also talked about how tidal nodes can be they're not just close to the land, like sometimes they can be, but they're also way out in the middle of water, far away. And I'm glad you brought that up, Zach. And this was interesting to me because I was looking for waves. I'm looking for wave patterns. And if we go to earth.nullschool.net or bobwins.net, we can look at the wave patterns. And this was interesting to me, kind of trying to substantiate their claim, right? Looking for echoes off of land or something like that might cancel the waves. And so if we go over to look over here at this, we got a tidal node off of South America, and it's going in this clockwise rotation right here. I'm going to look for that particular tidal node and look for kind of a wave pattern. And I think it's kind of like right around here, maybe. And you can see these waves are kind of interacting right there for some reason, something unusual. You get all these different waves conflicting. But what's causing those waves to conflict is another story. But the other interesting thing is I've watched this over several days and even weeks, and these tidal nodes tend to move around a little bit. Like I'll put the marker right here for a couple of days, and then all of a sudden after a while, it kind of shifts. I'm like, why did it shift way over there?
Which almost makes me wonder if the magnetic, whatever is creating the magnetic field, maybe it's not set in stone on the ground. Maybe it's up in the sky, something that actually moves.
And that reminds me of your demonstration with that reminds me of your demonstration here with your
hello everybody out there in
Van de Graaff generator, and how you got the kind of bulge in the water there just from the electrostatics. And so that was definitely one thing that kind of crossed my mind as I'm looking into further research on this matter is, do you think the salinity of the water would, like differences would affect this?
The electric field does change daily.
Mm-hmm.
Like it has a heartbeat of itself. It's, I think, 7 p.m. UTC. It starts elevating and goes up at about 15%. It maximizes out, I think, around 1 a.m. and then around 4 a.m. it's back down to its baseline. So it has like this daily heartbeat. So it could have something to do with the tides, possibly.
Mm-hmm.
I can't rule it out because it definitely fluctuates and has a heartbeat just like the tides do.
When I think about this, I'm thinking about like how the weather continually changes, kind of like what you're talking about. But I think the weather is a little bit less, it's a little bit more subject to change. You're not going to see a rainstorm at this time every day at 6 p.m. You know what I mean? And
Yeah,
so,
yeah. You can't
yeah.
rely on that.
And so
But
I
no,
think
the electric field does, it fluctuates and it's like a heartbeat. It has a pulse. And actually, whenever I measure the electric field, we have a meter. It has a heartbeat every few seconds. Like when I lay it, just a couple inches above the ground and it's going up to maybe 6 volts or something like that, it'll go down to 0 and then up to 6 and then back down to 0 and up to 6. And it's like a heartbeat constantly, the electric field. But then there's the big one that happens every night.
the big one that happens every night. So a big change in the electric field.
Yeah,
that
it
happens
goes
every
up
night?
about 15% in power.
Oh, wow.
And
You
it's
think
not based
that's
on where
weird
the
that would
sun
happen at
is.
nighttime?
Yeah, it's based on UTC.
Uh-huh.
So it's not like a,
Is that tied to the Schumann resonance at all?
I think so, yeah.
That's wild that it would be at nighttime because you'd think the sun would have more of an effect on it, kind of exciting things. You know what I mean?
And it seems to appear to start in the center like a drop of water in water and kind of move out from there. It
Mhm.
does like a wave almost. Really interesting.
Yeah.
It's hard to
That-
find good data on it though.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that was one of the interesting things here with kind of watching the wave patterns, kind of looking for some kind of a conflict and kind of wondering, what they're bouncing off of, like way out here in the middle of the ocean. Because if it would make a lot more sense if it was caused by this noise cancellation kind of a factor, then I would look for the same thing happening all over the place. And that was kind of one of the things about Australia is if we can go look at the wave patterns around Australia, I should expect to see the same kind of stuff over here as I do over here. And that's kind of where I started looking at ocean currents and kind of the way that moves. And that was, well, I'll get to that a little bit later, but that was kind of something that stood out to me here. And so, before getting into the ocean currents, I was going to show you the salinity. So this here is this shows you the varying salinity around Australia. And Australia's a really big hot point when it comes to tidal nodes because Australia has a really inconsistent tide where there's like next to no tide on this side of Australia and there's like a big high tide on this side of Australia. And so I'm kind of looking at salinity to kind of find a connection between maybe some electrostatics involved because electrostatics is by far superior to the whole gravitational theory, right? And so I'm kind of looking for something in that regard when it comes to tides. And when I see the salinity right here being pretty similar to the salinity over there, that kind of throws me through a loop. Because why would this place out here that has about the same salinity as over here, why would this side have no tide and this side have high tide? That doesn't quite make sense to me. And so that was another branch into this line of thought was, okay, well, what about these? There's a more technical term for it than underwater geyser. I'm trying to remember what it was called, like deep sea vents or something like that. I can't remember off the top of my head. I'm sorry. But yeah, these underwater geysers, I was wondering about that. I'm like, if underwater geysers are the things that are causing the tides, are they saltwater or are they freshwater? Because it would not affect the salinity. But it turns out these underwater geysers, they are actually saltwater. They're not freshwater. At least not all of them. Maybe some of them.
Wow.
Yeah. That one kind of threw me through a loop, because I think of like underground water that's normally freshwater, but with the ocean and these under deep sea geysers, they're not freshwater. So that was fascinating to me.
Interesting. Yeah.
Okay. Now, building on that though, okay, with these deep sea geysers, when I think of a geyser, I think of hot water, like really hot water, right? And so that kind of gets me thinking about ocean temperatures. I'm looking for those common features when it comes to all tidal nodes that can tell me this is for certain the cause, right? I think it was Austin who was talking about, I was watching an older GLOBEBUSTERS episode not too long ago, and Austin was talking about how if something is to prove something is the case, it has to be exclusive, right? We can't have all these other explanations out there that could be causing it. So what is the exclusive point that will for sure identify that this is the cause of tidal nodes? And that's what I'm really looking for. The common features that is the same with every single tidal node. And that's the really hard part when it comes to really investigating all this.
Yeah.
Doesn't really seem to be anything that really ties them all together.
Yeah. So I just kind of did a search on the ocean temperatures around Australia. And because I'm thinking that, as I said, if it's a deep sea geyser expelling a bunch of hot water, then I should expect a big shift in temperature from over here
Right,
and
but
over here.
that also doesn't seem to make sense with the timing. Again, that they work in perfect time. What is it that they have such a pulse? What the perfection of them? That's like the true mystery, is the perfection of them.
Yeah. But that's part of the fun of tidal nodes, is there's a lot of mystery involved in them. Now this one's a little bit more interesting. It kind of makes a little bit more sense. I'm not really sure what we're looking at here, but right here, just kind of looking at these colors, this would say that this area should have the low tidal node. And if this has the tidal node right here, which is like next to no tide, then the same should be said over here as well. But that's not quite the case either. And yeah. And so I can't say that tidal nodes are caused by ocean temperature. That kind of, when I look at Australia, that just gets thrown out the window. So yeah, I've got a whole bunch of different pictures of ocean temperatures kind of around the world here. And that's kind of an interesting one, right where that tidal node is. Okay, so that's ocean temperatures. I'm trying to remember what I was looking at here. This is ocean depth. Yeah, that's ocean depth. Kind of looking for, again, if it has to do with the depth, then I should expect to see the same thing all around here. It's deep over here, so that means there's no tide, but yeah, I don't know. So that was an interesting thing about depth. And over here, I've got we're looking at the major currents in the area. So you've got this current going out eastward, and we got this other current going south. So we south and then east. Okay. Again, there's no tide over here, but all of a sudden there's a high tide over here, which we've got the same arrows doing the same thing. How does this make sense? Oh, that was another thing I was going to point out on the points here. It says that in their description of Wikipedia's description of these points and what causes them, they talk about not clicking on something weird. Don't want to print out. Okay. So they talked about the Coriolis force and how that should be a factor in here. And so I kind of had a good laugh at it's not Coriolis, because these tidal nodes where it's revolving around the tidal node, they're going in both directions in the same hemisphere. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, they kind of contradict themselves left and right when it comes to looking at all this. It's just really funny when it comes to the I can just control.
I wonder if I can make tidal nodes with my cymatic plate. The pizza one, I bet I could, put a little silicone on the center so no water drips down, and it's got the upturned edges on that one. I wonder if I could make different tidal nodes with different vibrations like it does with the sand in the water.
Yeah, I think that one's really promising. Like I said, just it's one that I haven't heard anyone else talk about yet, but it seems, I like that theory a lot.
Maybe throw some land in there. I don't know.
Okay, so what was I going to talk about next? All right. So when it comes to tides, there's also this weird thing with the Suez Canal. And so there's a really popular old argument that I found Alexander Gleason. He was out there talking about the Suez Canal. And a big point is that the Suez Canal is a really long canal and it's level. There's no locks on it. Kind of Alexander Gleason, he's very verbose. He uses really complex language. It's great when it comes to fending off would-be naysayers, but if you can't follow along with all of his complex language, you lose the audience. And then all of a sudden, when you lose the audience, you lose like all of the persuasive power you've got. So it's kind of a delicate balance. I guess when you're in the heat of a debate and you're trying to show dominance or something like that, then people tend to use a lot of higher language to try and provoke other people and kind of intimidate them into not challenging your arguments as much. But when it comes to like written things like books, it doesn't do a whole lot. And so I don't really recommend that approach so much when it comes to like Facebook arguments or anything like that. You know what I mean? Anyways, his whole point is just that it's flat and level, and it's not like a huge argument. At least it's funny. I'll give it that. The kind of vertical is level on a globe, but yeah. When it comes to
102 miles long, that's enormous.
When it comes to articulating this whole thing, it's funny for the most part, because if you're to go ahead and determine what shape your living room floor is, the typical thing is you go use a level. But on a globe, you can't use level to measure level on a globe. It's just funny. And so, but the Suez Canal, it's really big. It's like right over here in Africa, and it's kind of hidden on this image right here. But if you zoom in, you can kind of see it right here. And the Suez Canal actually has a tide. Okay. It actually has a tide. And so that was kind of a big thing that a lot of people don't quite realize that the Suez Canal has a tide. Same thing as the Red Sea. There's a little bit of tide. It's not huge, but it's some. And so I wanted to point that out with the Suez Canal. And the interesting thing about the Suez Canal that I haven't really heard anyone else kind of highlight is with that tide, there's also a current. There's a current to the Suez Canal. And okay, so Alexander Gleason he brought this up, but he was also kind of quoting from Robotham in Zetetic Astronomy. He's the first person that I'm aware of that's ever brought up the Suez Canal on flat Earth evidence. Anyway, I really like following the history involved in all this. But the interesting thing is the Suez Canal, the current on that canal changes direction. Okay, so on one part of the year it's northward current, and then on the other part of the year it's a southward current, and you'd think it would be always the same, especially if that's or it'd be changing like every day with every tide. I don't know, it's kind of a wild thing to think about.
That is, I've never heard that before. That's crazy.
So that sounds like it would be tied to the sun then, a little, or the sun, because if the sun, if it changes halfway through the year, that's the sun is going on either side of the equator. Does it match that, or is it different? I don't know.
That's a good question. I haven't quite fully investigated that one. This one just really popped out to me, kind of how the tide.
Oh, it says right there from November to June.
Uh-huh.
And it reverses southward direction in summer from August to September.
So it goes south in the summer. Okay. Yeah, and that was just fascinating to me, because you think that it's perfectly level all the time, but if it's got a current, it's hard to picture a current if it's perfectly level. You know what I mean? When I think of like perfectly level water, I think of water that has no current whatsoever. Kind of like going up and down, uphill or downhill, but it's weird that it's changing direction. Yeah. And turns out Galileo, he wrote this big discourse on tides, and the Globe just kind of laughs at that, and they said Galileo was completely wrong about tides. And that was kind of another tidbit of interesting history for me, kind of looking at his claims, and I'm trying to polish that up into kind of interesting people and interesting claims throughout history. Was Galileo is definitely one of them. So
Galileo said, will you zoom in on that again real quick?
Yeah.
The notion that the moon influenced the tides is childish and occult.
Yeah. That
Can
was.
you click on that occult and see what the definition they're using there?
That was just
it's not. Okay, don't worry about it. Then it's okay. Yeah.
Well, I think I might still have it. I don't remember. I've got too many tabs open.
Yeah, no worries.
Just kind of type in just Galileo and tides, and that was kind of what did Galileo say about the tides, and this was kind of one of the things that popped up for me. Calling it childish and occult to say that it was caused by the moon, and the really fascinating thing about Galileo that stands out in history is he was kind of accused of heresy, right? Suspicion of heresy. And so because everybody at the time knew that the Bible does not describe the heliocentric model, right? The Bible does not describe that. And because the church acknowledged that, and they looked at Galileo, hey, you guys are teaching contrary to the Bible. And they lived in a theocracy at the time. And so because he's challenging the Bible, that's why he got put on house arrest, right? But what's more fascinating to me, is they made a bigger deal about that than Galileo. He went and had a whole bunch of kids out of wedlock. He was fornicating with some woman he wasn't married to, and the Catholic Church just totally turned a blind eye to that. We don't care. but they made a big deal about this. So I had a laugh about that. And it's like, what? Really? That's a bigger deal than that? And so I don't know. But, yeah. It's just kind of a silly thing to me. Because I don't know. It's just funny. But yeah, I think that's about wrapping it up. Oh, that's just a longer video from Don't Spare the Truth. They've got like an hour-long video that kind of talks about just kind of the wild and crazy things here with tides. But a lot of this stuff, as you've seen, didn't quite show up in that video. And so I really liked seeing the temperatures and things like that. And the thing about the underwater geyser theory is I just can't seem to figure out why that would cause the tides to rotate around them. You know, the whole thing with New Zealand and the tides going around New Zealand. How does that work with underwater geyser theory? Like that, I just can't quite fathom that one. Got the tides going around that.
I look at all this stuff and I'm like, what is that? What is I have no idea.
Yeah. But the important thing is, yeah, again, what Austin said is exclusivity. It's got to be the only thing that describes or that can explain it.
Mm-hmm.
In order to prove something, it has to be exclusive. I think this wave thing, that was interesting to me, where you kind of see the unusual wave patterns and what's causing those unusual wave patterns.
It makes me think about this is kind of cheesy, but you know, in the Pirates of the Caribbean where they're out in the ocean and they end up and there's a big whirlpool.
Yeah.
It makes me wonder if in the middle, if there's a node point where that's what's happening, like the water's going around, it's making a whirlpool in the ocean. Like, does that really happen?
Yeah, that's a good thought.
I have no idea.
we had that whirlpool on the map. Remember the map we were looking at in the giant whirlpool that we were looking into when we were doing the map on Monday, or that's not right. The old map, beautiful map, and they had the big whirlpool on the map.
Big whirlpool.
Oh, the Urbano Monte one?
Exactly. Remember on the Urbano Monte, then we were looking at pictures of that, of a whirlpool, and again it existed, and then we brought up pictures of it.
I think that was like right around, was that around South America?
Oh, no, Norway. It was around Norway.
Oh,
and by the way, looking at, and I
Uh-huh.
lost the microphone when you guys asked me about the Sargasso Sea and a node on there, and negatory. The Sargasso Sea would be off of the coast of North America, out a little bit, kind of like if you're looking at off of South America or off of North America and looking, that's to like some of that middle green color, the darker green, but not extending that whole way. It kind of like goes up the coast, like the bottom third portion of that, not lime green, but the middle green next to it would be kind of an area where, you know, like I'm trying to place it for you. So if you did like the bottom third, if you go off of,
Or is it on the side or this
North
side?
America in the Atlantic Ocean and see the bright lime green. Okay, now
Bright
see
lime
that
green.
other color of green next to it. Yeah, that
Mhm.
one. Now take like about the bottom third of that green block.
Like around Bermuda Triangle area.
Right. Yeah, right in there. And then that's going to be like your Sargasso Sea. It's you can bring it, I mean, you can type it in and do it. I'm not doing perfect. I'm just trying to give you a general area about where the sea is and saying that it's not anywhere near where you have any of the nodes on there, because you wanted to know if there was a node where that sea was.
Is it an anti-node?
So yeah, right in you can look it up, and again, I'm not giving you a perfect thing on it, but if you looked at the Sargasso Sea, it would not be where that node is. It's north of there. It's north of the node.
Mhm.
The sea is. It's
There's
almost
a
like
node right
directly
here, but
Interesting.
yeah, and there's another node right there, but I'm not quite sure what other node you're talking about in here.
That bottom
Well, it looks
window
like
that you just
there's
had on it.
Oh, this one.
It
Yeah.
also looks like there's one right there in the New England area. It's like in the land though,
In the land.
right? It starts to turn yellow and red right there, really tight in the coast of
Like it looks like it wants to be one.
like Nova Scotia area.
Like something right here.
Yeah, a little bit lower.
Uh-huh.
Unless, what am I, right there? Yeah, right there.
That one looks pretty red. I think red was supposed to be like really high tide.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that?
And then like the dark blue was like next to no tide.
Yeah, I thought your notes in the middle of this is where there was no tide was what I thought you were talking about with the this map, unless I have it wrong. But where it makes in the middle of it again, where your lines are coming together, those are your nodes, right?
Yeah,
Does
these
the
are major
Gulf,
nodes.
does the Gulf of America not have a tide?
That's the weird thing. Yeah, I noticed that. It's like how, yeah, it apparently has no tide in there, which is interesting. How, yeah, it doesn't
really
make any
weird
sense
to me
on
on
the.
that. But it's also all that goes also to like the south of the Caribbean islands and all that. So interesting.
Mhm.
It's like nothing really going on right there or something. Like what is that?
Yeah, just dead zone right there when it comes to tide. But over here, huge tides.
Wow, there's whirlpools. There's a lot more of those whirlpools than I thought there were.
Uh-huh.
Be a fun topic to look into and gather the different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That might tie in with a lot of this stuff. Because
Yeah.
there's some that are always there. There's one off the coast of Maine. I know there's a big one off the coast of Norway.
That would be fun to look into. I do know on
Yeah.
Tide, several people in the chat said that Shane St. Pierre did a beautiful Tide 10-minute Tide explanation that I dropped into our chat. I don't know if we want to play Shane's 10-minute explanation
Sure.
on tides, or if we want to
Do you
just do it.
You have a
I dropped
link?
it. I dropped it into the tech chat, our main tech group. I put it in the Skype chat.
Skype chat.
And it's they dropped the link in our chat. Daryl Davis did, thank you so much. But in our Skype chat, I dropped it.
Okay. Is there a timestamp or just play it or?
Well, it's a 10-minute. It's a 10-minute thing on it, so we can see how quick he's talking and speed it up if it, if there's room for it. But let's see what it is. I have not seen it.
I can end my screen.
You want me to share it? Yeah, I can share it,
Yeah.
Kyle. Yeah.
I'll try and figure out how to.
I have not previewed it, but I do like those guys. They're GLOBEBUSTERS now, so yeah, that's.
They have been doing phenomenal work. I have been very impressed with the new Sunday show going on with the new crew members. Phenomenal work.
Yeah, they're doing a good job.
Loving it and enjoying it and learning some from it. And
yeah, I'm glad that they're part of the crew.
Okay, let me close that out. Sorry, folks. Give me 1 second here. That stuff just jump up on screen and start playing. All right. Let's see. We're gonna add that. Okay. And we'll just go full screen on it. Okay. This is the gentleman over. This is Shane St. Pierre, and I believe this is Space Audit's channel. Oop. Let me see real quick. Yeah, Space Audits. Go send them a subscription and all that good stuff. Doing amazing work. These guys, they dig deep when it comes to any type of research, and they have the brain power to really, absorb it and comprehend it and then turn around and share it with other people. So great additions to the GLOBEBUSTERS for sure. All right, here we go.
They're not like physical bodies. I think that's something that's pretty interesting. If they're, so if they're not like physical bodies, or even if they are physical bodies, like how are they?
Static, consistent.
Yeah, it's so interesting to me. Static and moving.
As a static, consistent, sonoluminescent, persistent ether perturbation. There you go. Watch me make an acronym out of that one.
There you go. Yeah. T-shirt that right there.
That's what I've been missing.
No idea.
Shane.
The thing about that I find most interesting is the specific thing on frequencies where like especially with interferometry and like fringe patterns, when you have wave interference, you have like constructive and destructive interference. And if you think about it with like regular waves, right, we're reinforcing or like, removing from, and like mathematically they apply that concept to how they get gravitational influence from the sun and the moon, specifically in the tides when they're trying to use Newton's law of gravitation, the mass of the sun and the moon. And that's how they get the tidal lunar acceleration ratio of like 2.1 from the moon, because specifically they utilize a concept which is not even really logistically sound. It hasn't been proven to exist, of gravitational wave constructive interference, meaning that literally when the moon and the sun are close together, which is when it happens when you have your neap and high tides, right? That they say that because the gravitation's bodies are towed together and the mass now in that area is relatively large, what happens is that when the moon is next to the sun, the moon takes a little bit of gravitational influence from the sun, uses it in a positively reinforcing way that increases the gravitational potential of the mass of the moon, so that the moon gets to exert a larger force gravitationally on the tides, even though it's a 90-degree offset. And that's actually why mathematically Newton's law of gravitation means how the tides work, dude. And of course, that's within the equilibrium tidal theory with all the ridiculous assumptions of uniform activity, specific reaction time to, uniform reaction time to gravitational influence, and no consideration for basins and topography and movement and all that crazy stuff. But I just thought the constructive interference part, they just wildly willy-nilly get to abuse scientific concepts like that right under our nose, and then use the math that has no basis in reality to justify something that even within their theoretical background of speculation isn't even accurate or working. Because when it comes down to it, they still use to predict tides, they use tidal constituents and tidal harmonics, which again reduce tides to what? Frequencies, which means they're doing frequencies and sinusoidal predictions, and they're taking components of that wave and they're saying, hey, based on the previous iterations of this wave, we can use a series of interpolation, and we can say, based on filling out the sinusoidal wave pattern with the
It's hard to follow him. He's talking so fast.
Accuracy means we can make tidal predictions, and that's in fact how they make tidal predictions. Nothing to do with Newton's law of gravitation. Certainly not in indicating the tidal lunar influence of 2.1 from the moon back to the sun.
Bro, everybody needs to play that back.
I tried to go slow. I was being conscious.
Dude, that was actually really, really well put. I never even I've never really looked into how they do the waves and the predictions of the waves and things like that. So that was excellent.
It gets better, man, because what happens is when the moon is next to the sun, it's called the synodic month. It's a specific observed periodicity of the moon, but it's really most tied to its luminosity. So you know how it goes from sun full to nut. So
right.
But it's actually, if you look at the Gleason's map, I put a video out where it's not that the moon is taking the sun's light and reflecting it. Of course, it's that the lesser light can't emit next to a greater light. And when you see its proximity close to the sun, it proportionally loses its luminosity, so that when it's next to it, it actually cannot shine at all. And only in that instance is it so-called influencing the tide with that 2.1 ratio of tidal lunar acceleration. So they get away with saying, well, actually, it's when the sun is next to the tides, that's what's happening. And it's what their math is saying is that, well, when the moon is in phase, it has more mass, and it's actually exerting a higher force on the tide when it's near the sun, and that's really what's happening. That's what the tidal lunar acceleration ratio means. How two masses of so differing bodies can exert such a crazy effect, and that's why it's
so fast.
And that's why the basis.
Pause that a minute.
Robert Bennett's paper when
Oh,
he tried to
right. I'm sorry. I made Zach was in the other room.
Find the centrifugal effect, and then found that if that was true, then it would.
Oh, that's hysterical. Thank you for running, Zach. That was I even watched you walk across the house before I said pause that. That was a quick run. And Zach is out of breath for me. This is interesting because while I'm listening to it, one of the things that would change really in flat Earth model that I don't know if they're considering is that if we again give the property of heat to the sun and the moon going near the sun and warming up, it would make it less magnetic, because again the properties magnetism and light, fluorescent lighting, dim as you get hotter. So again, as your sun is getting, or the moon is getting closer to the sun, it would be getting dimmer, and the magnetics would be weaker. So while he's doing the different talks on it, one of the things to stop and all of the magnetics on it. In other words, just the entire I believe that the moon has some magnetic basis to it just by the properties that we, have on it. But again, as you
Mhm.
get closer to the sun, it's going to have a much weaker magnetic field. I'm not sure how this is. He's talking quickly, and when I told you that if it goes slow, speed it up, the idea of speeding this man up is frying my brain.
Yeah.
the idea
Yeah.
the idea of him in 1.5 speed, but just like even pausing to what he's saying, it would be good to go back on it. I don't know if he's connecting all of the pieces, but he's throwing some great pieces out there.
Yeah.
Really
I
great
think
pieces out there.
the important thing to remember here is that there's two factors here. There's the sun and moon, which kind of have their own effect on the electrostatics involved here, but the earth itself and the things within the earth, that also has a factor. And so there might be one point that is less receptive towards all of that because of the change in salinity or something like that, right? Although I don't know, that's kind of the thing where I'm not quite following the correlation with that, because I don't know, the whole, we're looking at two different areas that have the same salinity, but one has no tide and the other one does, and they're both on the same path of the moon. So I
Right.
blows
Again,
my
it's
mind.
just different ways to look at it. But
Yeah.
yeah. Thank you, Zach. Keep
Yeah,
going.
no
Or
problem.
unless
Big shout out real quick to Murray Cole over on Rockfin. $20 tip. Thank you so much, Murray. Big supporter of the channel. All
Shout out
right,
to Murray.
here we go.
Would be like something like 17,000 times stronger because the tidal lunar acceleration should be equal based on the distances and the actual solar masses of the sun and the moon. But that was from a different presentation.
That's dope. Man, there's so many things that just if you don't understand the underlying factors, or if you never looked into it, you would kind of go, yeah, that makes sense. But then when you look into it, it's like, not really.
Absolutely, because like again, that's their explanation within tidal equilibrium theory, but they don't explain the tidal offset, meaning that if they're saying the moon is gravitationally pulling all the tides around, how come there's not this giant tidal bulge following the moon in its proximity under any identifying method? Because it never has that. That's not a thing. So it actually is this offset where it's like 90 degrees for where the highest tide will be, and that's directly linked to the moon's phase. That's the underlying factor, not anything, which is again in itself linked to the proximity next to the sun. So they got away with relying on the map, saying that hey, because of this proximity and Newton's form of gravitation and all these masses that exerts a higher force due to tidal lunar acceleration constructively, meaning that it gets to add to the gravitational influence because of that mathematically. Look, boom, it works. And they get to eke out of the crazy explanation of like what the hell is that when it's exerting a crazier force on the tidal and the moon. But the offset means that when the moon is like, passing over it, the high tide is like on the other side of the earth almost. So if you're saying that the moon is gravitationally pulling the tides around, then how come it's always 90 degrees off? How come the highest tide is never where the moon is? Right? That's the whole point of what Robert Bennett was trying to put forth with his paper, which is what inspired me to look into it in the first place, man. Yeah.
Yeah, that I want to go look into it too now, but I mean, there's so many other things I got to do. But damn, that's crazy. I hope people get a chance to really hear this back, because I know it's early over there. Man,
tides are one of my favorite things, man. I did a nice presentation on Germans, I think, a while back. I was trying to debate Ozian on tides, and I went way over prepared, and then he like dipped out of the thing, and I was like, "That's probably for your benefit, bro. That was gonna be ugly."
Yeah, like I definitely couldn't debate you on it. I'd get crushed. My goodness.
I keep thinking about
I never knew
So
that.
are those pink spots the tidal nodes?
Ridiculous.
So it's like spring and neap tides, right? That's what
I'm not sure. I think the pink spots might be the high points in the
you
tide.
can, if you go back to that, if you go and pause it, it wasn't necessarily the pink spots, but they had the nodes marked on there, Karen. If you look at
I
them,
thought when
they're
it was
marked in like the
it
little
was
asterisks.
phasing
Okay,
in
I
and
see it.
out.
Yeah, that's kind of what you made, Karen, last time.
That doesn't. Yeah, you do. You see it there where they come into it, and that's where your nodes are where your little asterisks come together, and they look like spider veins.
Mm-hmm.
So your pink spots are not falling into. No, your
You
pink
gotta
spots are your higher.
let it play a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. Those. That's what I was looking at. What are those? Are those? What is that?
It's not the same thing as the spider, the little spider.
They're close by though. That
Yeah.
looks there's
Very
some
similar.
correlation to that, a little offset. That's interesting.
Yeah. I just keep thinking about the words of Neil Tyson when he's talking about dark matter, dark energy, and being 93% stupid about the universe.
Mhm.
And he says, this makes it sound like we know something. We don't. And I just keep thinking about that with all
But
these
we
tides.
might learn again overlapping in it. That is interesting. I wonder on there, do they explain what the pink spots are on there? Or are they giving any legends on these why?
Ooh,
Mm.
let's see.
Because that would be an interesting key I would want
I
to
hope
see right
I
there.
hope people get a chance to really hear this back, 'cause I know it's early over there.
No, I don't think they get into the
They're
images.
just doing the visuals. Okay.
Yeah.
I can talk to Shane and ask him.
Man.
Suppose his new group, yeah.
Wait,
Presentation on
are those different
Good eye,
places?
Karen.
I think it has to do with like the locations where the sun and moon might like overlap or something, like eclipse points.
No, because there's one
Yeah.
right there by Greenland.
Yeah, there's
okay.
way up
Okay.
here, yeah.
Man.
Tides are one of my
I just saw the sun pass over right there. It's hidden it.
Mm-hmm.
I think a while back. I was trying to debate Ozian on tides, and I went way over prepared, and then he like dipped out of the thing, and I was like, "That's probably for your benefit, bro. That was gonna be ugly."
Yeah, I think those are nodes. A lot of them they're at least somewhat close.
Exactly. They definitely pattern with them. That's what I want to know is that they're not right on there, but there's a patterning, and it's not on all of them. You go between
Yeah, there's one here that
South
isn't
America, and
pink
yeah, you've got
one.
several of them that are not in touch, but where they do match up, seem to be.
Maybe they're just highlighting a few of them instead of all of them.
No, I think that again they're putting different graphics and overlaying one on top of another, and those ones good eye, Karen. Those weren't the pink spots I was looking at. Again, we can go back on it another time. There's a lot to learn on it, but that's worth going into on it.
That's
Curious
amazing.
what that represents.
I never knew that they were.
Yeah, I'll ask him this Sunday.
There was that offset that you're talking about where it's opposite. That's ridiculous.
It's like spring and neap tides, right? That's what you'll look up and you'll find their explanation is a weird juxtaposition of offsets where it's like, well, the tidal lunar, they're not going to tell you the way I told you. Even the equilibrium tidal theory is just this theory that actually all the stuff respond uniformly. The oceans of Earth respond uniformly to all forms of gravity without a delay. That's bullshit. It responds as if nothing is in motion. So no sky, no Earth in motion. We eliminate that. That's crazy. Like there's no topography, meaning so there's no hills, mountains, higher, like eliminate all the variables and still fuck it up and still can't get it right and then be like, okay, well, this is how it works. And then like, okay, but when we really have to predict it, they use a completely different theory, right? It's like they put that whole mathematically based Newton thing aside and they go, oh, but if you want to know how high the tide's going to be tomorrow, we're going to look at tidal constituents and sinusoidal relation. We're going to tell you specifically based on the historicity of it. It just means they have a nice mathematical model that predicts it very akin to a wave pattern that has specific amplitudes that they tie to what they call tidal constituents, like M2 and M3 and whatever, that have very predictable responses. So that's how they get high tide.
It's like and it's funny. I think like I'm starting to think like they just use those things and theoretical things that they can math and use them as presentations. Like that makes great videos, that makes great models, like you said, and they can show that, they can model it out, and they can be like, oh, this looks like this and that, and they can present it that way. But it's, but like you said, at the end of the day, then they go back to this other thing. But that other thing isn't what is getting people's eyes and attention, Yeah,
man. Like everyone thinks that like a tidal bulge is real, right? Because like they used to talk about that. They used to be like, do you think there's a bulge like I'm chasing like at the equator? Like, no, that's not a thing. There's no bulge chasing the moon around, which there would have to be. If you look it up on like Google, you'll find all these animations. But if you look at the actual like tidal maps, and I have many animations that just show like the oscillating tide, and then you show the path of the moon, it matches not at all. It's completely random according to the path of the moon. So
Yeah, they say one thing and then show another. It's
now it does have an effect because it does have an electromagnetic effect within the sun and the moon. So, like my unsupported
many
speculative
things, Kyle.
answer, hypothetically, for what's
Sorry, what?
happening with the sun and the moon.
So they do that with so many things.
Oh yeah.
Say one
Yeah.
thing and show you another.
All their diagrams say one thing. It's kind of like the whole NASA claim that the light from the sun is parallel, except for when there's a solar eclipse, right?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, that's when you get all the umbra and penumbra.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Has to do with the dielectric sun nature and the magnetic moon, right? So they're not the cathode and the diode. I think one's dielectric, one's magnetic, meaning the moon like physically pulls the water around with the magnetic and all the salt water essentially having a higher influence on the seas and all the ponds and all that stuff. And the sun has an electric effect, meaning it has an electric field, and it has what's called telluric currents, which are actually well-known oceanic, like deep beneath the Earth's crust. They say it follows the solar wind, meaning that it's actually pulling the sun around. Like even in the heliocentric model, they're known to follow the solar wind. And it's the deep currents underneath the sun. But what it actually does is introduce a perpendicular offset to the sun and the moon. So the moon is pulling the water around according to the anthrodromic points, which are like the tidal nodes, which run sort of these lines radially around specific tidal nodes, which they control the tidal amplitude around specific points. And then the sun has this electric field, which interacts with the ocean topography deep beneath it, which actually has this electric field. So once they interact like that, then you have the specific tidal influences, and then that you have a direct reaction with the sun and the moon, meaning that as soon as the path intercedes, you get the super high tides and the highest highs, meaning that's what actually intercedes with the spring and the neap tides, because that would explain the 9-degree offset, because it's always just a little bit behind the sun or whatever.
Yeah, this just gets me asking again, what's the cause? Is it the tidal node that's causing the tides, or is the something else affecting the tidal nodes, kind of creating them? Yeah. So
what's making the tidal node? What
in other words,
constitutes a tidal node?
Yeah.
Are they saying the tidal nodes are making the
cause or the effect, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Still to go on there, I do like it that they were assigning the properties of electrical to the sun and magnetic to the moon. I 100% agree to that. I think it's a great step. It's still stuff to dive deeper into. It's a great show, guys. It's
always food for thought.
Great food for thought and really interesting to start delving into, because again, I think answering these questions and seeing how it works, if we really want to answer the questions, you've got to delve in a little bit into the anomalies and that. So this is a great one.
Yeah, great presentation, Kyle. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm glad I didn't totally fumble that one, because sometimes when I get really excited, I start talking really fast and then I just start tripping all over myself.
Nope, you did real well.
Thank you. I tried to slow it down, and yeah, I think it helps.
So what you got coming up this week, sir?
This week, I'm not entirely sure. I've got so many different ideas kind of jumbled up together that I want to do a highlight reel. I really do on the Copernicus and some of these historic people like Galileo. I want to kind of polish that up a little bit more and kind of make a statement on that one. I've got a ton of conversations that I want to put into a video. I've got so many different ideas. I'm not quite sure where to go with them yet, but yeah, I think
sure you'll figure something out.
I'll figure something out. Yeah.
All right. Miss Karen B, what you got coming up this week, ma'am?
Hope maybe an anti-religious scripture study. I'm not sure, because Jack he worked too much the week before last, so he didn't have time to do the translation. But so hopefully we'll be back with that, and then just
there's a lot of work that goes into those folks.
Yeah.
Just to let you know.
Yeah. My favorite part is just the focus on the Hebrew. Not enough people really focus on what the Hebrew actually says, because when you understand the Hebrew, it often paints a very different picture than just trying to read it in English.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. So that, yeah, and then coffee talk. That's what I got
Love
going
coffee
on.
talk. You've been rolling coffee talks long. It was just a few months ago. You're like, I'm gonna get these down to about an hour and a
I
half or
know.
so.
I
And
know.
then
You do a great job on those.
I come back in or something. It's like 1:30, 2 o'clock, and
I
still rolling
know. It's
strong.
terrible.
But we love it. We do.
You keep
for
them
sure.
interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad.
And Cammy, what you got coming up this week, ma'am?
Oh, I have a slow week. This week we don't have a show tomorrow night. Sunday I'll be in the chat on GLOBEBUSTERS, and I'm hoping, I haven't heard yet if we're gonna have a fire party this Sunday, but I've kind of gotten addicted to building
Burning
fires on
stuff.
burning stuff on Sundays. So we'll have to see. I know that there's a couple more houses on the list that want it, but I'm not quite sure. Karen and I have been talking about going to different like ruins and different historical areas.
Mm-hmm.
Around North and South Carolina, and so depending on the weather, we might get started on that. And
That sounds incredibly fun.
yeah, it is. We got some pretty neat things here too. Some underground areas and fun areas to go to. We have a little town that's not too far away. That's like, trying to remember the time frame of it, but I thought it was interesting because it's a tiny town type of thing. The buildings are 5.5 or 6 feet tall.
Oh wow.
And it was built by hippies, and they did a whole village out of it, and it's all out of stone and that. And I wonder if they wouldn't have documented
Couldn't even
making
stand up.
this. Yeah, if they wouldn't have documented making this, like in the forest in North Carolina and that, and if you came across that, you sit there, you wouldn't be able to date the stones. They, put the stones up there. You would pretty much think, wow, little people lived in this area, and they were, maybe 3.5 or
The
4 feet, or the hobbits. So,
they talk about people from, I think it might be New Guinea or something like that lived. They were like the tallest people were 4 feet tall,
Pygmies.
and they lived in
yeah.
like underground, just like the movie The Hobbit. They had like in-ground little huts that they built out and covered with grass and stuff like that, and yada. It was amazing. Yeah, I guess the British royalty were hunting these people up until the 70s for sport.
Oh wow.
Oh, that's not
Shocking. The British royalty.
Mm-hmm. And now, we kind of frown upon stuff like that, so they quit, allegedly. But
just do Poldo
yeah,
instead.
humans are just as different as any other species out there. Cats, dogs, this, that. Doesn't, we come in all different shapes and sizes, just like all other things. And it's weird because you think about it, and maybe there would be hobbit people and stuff like that in more abundance if it weren't for, people that felt like they could go and hunt them.
I just laugh every time because when it comes to dogs, there's a ton of different breeds of dogs, right? Tons and tons of breeds of dogs, but you still consider them dogs. But all of a sudden, a bone structure is just a little bit different on a human. That's no longer human. Now it's some other species or something like that. It's totally, we're going to classify it completely different. Not human. Like, oh my goodness. Come on, guys. Come on.
Yeah, I've been watching a lot of things on evolution, and some of the stuff that people have done, they'll find like this part of the human skull and then take the jawbone of an ape and like fit it in there.
Is that Lucy? That Lucy was famous for that? Or I don't know, it was one of them that they were kind of doing that.
Yeah, there was, because the teeth are totally different down here.
Yeah.
We have kind of the same top teeth a little bit, but down here their teeth are totally different. And yeah, they just take a jawbone of a different animal and throw it on there.
Yeah.
And Kyle, I don't know if you've ever seen this, but people are like looking at the bones of animals we have now and comparing them to dinosaur bones. And what they did with a lot of the dinosaur bones is they removed all facial tissue and muscle and all that kind of stuff. So when you take a nice little bunny rabbit and remove all that stuff, you can make it look like a velociraptor.
Yeah, I really like the hippopotamus. When you look at the bones, the bone structure of a hippo, and it looks totally like you'd never expect that from a hippo.
Yeah, there was a museum I went to, and that they had like a dinosaur bone in there, and I was like, this looks like a whale bone. It
Right.
just looked like a whalebone, and like the other one just looked like it looked like a bird of prey or something. Like it was a, you know, it was like
Did
an
I get
eagle's
stuck with my
claw or
microphone
something.
on or off? Am I
You're
on
on.
or off on the microphone?
You're
Yeah,
on.
I'm on.
On.
Okay. I don't know. I lost my microphone and my controls on my page, so I didn't know where I was. But no, that article was great, and they're like re-looking at all the dinosaur information and saying that, wow, we just rebuilt them by shrink wrapping. And can you imagine even people, how scary people look when you like shrink wrap on the skeleton or all of the different things. But they again did the assumptions, held on to it, built it, and somebody stopped and said, wait a minute, look, the dog, yeah, a lot of the dogs and horses and that totally, when they did the same technology they did to the dinosaurs on all of the different, like all of the animals started looking like dinosaurs. So it was
Mhm.
amazing.
Yeah. There's a big dinosaur museum in Utah called Thanksgiving Point, and you've got these big, huge, the big skeletons where they have them all suspended on wires so they stand up, kind of like the famous like T-Rex and stuff like that. Right? In Jurassic Park, you see that big bone structure, and when you go through the museum, you start to notice that so many of the bones on display are just absolute fakes. They're just replicas, and a lot of them are just completely imagined. They don't know for sure that they're there, but we're thinking that this might be here and stuff like that. And you kind of pull out the magnifying glass, and it's really shocking just how much of that stuff is just totally put there by imagination only.
All
What's
right.
great is that how many times it happens that somebody imagined it, did it, and everybody assumes, jumps on it, and nobody stops to say, wait, we could
Yeah,
have imagined it a little bit differently. But yeah, okay, go ahead, Zach.
Oh, I was just gonna say, yeah, that's gonna about wrap it up. Unless you guys had anything else.
No.
We will not be doing Iron Row Media tomorrow morning. Josh had his eye surgery today, and everything went well.
Oh, good.
We just didn't want to, overstimulate anything, and he's going to be taking off tomorrow. I'm going to be getting up bright and early though, and for all of you that come over and hang out, are in the Ironworks chat group, we will be in there. You're more than welcome to just come on in and hang out. We're just going to be doing whatever, listening to music, talking.
This
you
on
know.
Discord?
No, on Skype.
Oh, okay.
We do a thing on Skype. I'll send you an invite, Kyle, if you want to come
Okay.
over there. Yeah, we're
It's
always.
Really early, Kyle.
I'm a night
He
owl.
works at
Really.
night,
Okay.
so yeah, it'd be
Okay, so
perfect
you're
for you. It'd be like 3
perfect,
a.m.
yeah.
for you
Yeah, that's perfect for me. That's
when we
like
start doing our shows. Yeah.
Yeah. I can always be there chatting, but I can always listen. Yeah.
There you go. Well, all right,
I was doing
everybody.
stuff at work all the time.
We will see you back here again Sunday for GLOBEBUSTERS, 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. Remember, be good to each other. Don't lie to each other. Open your mind because there's truth inside. Peace out, everyone.
Peace.
Shout out to Chief Crow.
Good job. Thank you.